talk about the rise of the technician economy. For decades, our economy was largely defined by invention. We rewarded companies that could build faster, innovate faster, and scale technology faster. That created an enormous value here for the United States. But the economic question is changing. Today, capital is flowing into advanced manufacturing, AI, energy, infrastructure. It's at historic levels. Here in America, we know how to invent the future. What we're struggling to do is deploy it. Projects you'll hear are getting delayed. Production ramps are slowing. Critical technical roles remain unfilled. Because building something is very different from operating it at scale. And that shift from an economy that is primarily defined by innovation and invention to one that is increasingly defined by deployment. The people that power that economy are building, operating, connecting, running machines, maintaining, sustaining very complex digital physical systems. And we call them the technicians. They're the actors of the technician economy. Let's move to the next slide. So the US is sending two signals at the exact same time. One signal is an investment of over $1 trillion with a T dollars in new industrial investment. The other signal at the same time is $1 trillion lost in economic output. Just think about that. We are investing at historic levels while losing at historic levels. That's a net zero gain. We're building the future faster than we can actually operate it or deploy it. And that contradiction is showing up everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, energy, whatever sector it is. This is not simply a workforce shortage. This is an economic capacity problem. It's an economic capacity problem because economic growth is only realized when investment becomes operating capacity. Right now, that conversion continues to slide downward. So for decades, we've celebrated innovation as the engine of growth, which we should. And innovation has mattered greatly, and it needs to continue. But bottom line is that innovation defines what can be built, what is possible. But deployment is what determines what gets built and creates that reality. And operating capacity is created at deployment, not at an announcement, not in the lab. At the moment systems are installed, maintained, operated, repaired, that's the technician territory. The technician work that is under major time pressures and deadlines and happening in live environments. That is now that technician territory that sits at the center of economic growth. The problem is actually getting harder to solve, not easier. The innovation deployment gap is structural. Why? Shipbuilding, or is it in maritime? Is it in defense? What is it in? All of those roles are coming together because the sectors and industries are converging. And technology, it's evolving even faster than what institutions can respond. Technical roles are becoming more hybrid driven. electrical, electronic, and industrial IT, all collapsed into one role. So if you remember, it's always about going to school and going down one line of path. Not anymore. It's all collapsed together. So while innovation is accelerating, deployment's getting harder, and the gap, the innovation deployment gap, continues to widen. This is where the real failure happens. Demand exists, capability exists, infrastructure exists, but they're disconnected. Right now, we have more than 1,000 community and technical colleges in all 50 states, and there's training infrastructure there. Zero real-time coordination between training capacity and employer demand at scale. That means employers can't see the supply, colleges can't see the real demand, regions can't scale capacity fast enough. So that demand doesn't convert. Our response has been fragmented. We put more into training, more into hiring, more facilities, more programs, more funding. All of these things absolutely matter. But none of them can solve the problem alone. They are necessary individually, but insufficient collectively, because the issue isn't around effort. It's around coordination. This is where the technician economy begins. And the technician economy is the coordination layer that connects structural shifts with employer demand, with training capacity, with technical capability, and real jobs. So demand becomes operating capacity, and that operating capacity then translates into durable economic mobility. That's the shift from fragmented activity to coordinated execution. So when coordinated, everything changes. Employers can scale faster, colleges can align faster, technicians can move into better jobs faster, regions become more competitive, and communities grow. Same infrastructure, different outcomes. That difference is coordination. And that system is the technician economy. So now, we're going to move from framework into theory. Framework and theory into real life. You'll hear from leaders who are building the technician economy in real time. That's this whole stage full of leaders. So think of a rocket ship. We are now in the countdown stage, right now, before it launches into orbit. So stage one is countdown. And that is going to talk about why new infrastructure becomes necessary. That's this group that's spread out, guys. And then stage two is liftoff. What happens, liftoff and launch, what happens when regions begin coordinating demand in real time? And stage three is orbit. What happens when the technician economy begins to scale nationally? This is what a new economic system looks like when it starts turning on. That's the stages that we are going to actually start with now. We is going to help with is going to facilitate the countdown stage and kick it off.
Good afternoon, everybody. I thought I'd share the origin story as the start for this countdown piece. And so Parminder called me in probably October of 2018, and we went through a conversation together. And at the end of the conversation, I said, Parminder, you have me at hello? But I thought I'd share with you my thought process. So what got me to say yes, right? So just for the backdrop, Parminder and I worked together when she was at Gates and I was at Shoreline Community College in the Seattle, Washington area. So when she called me, I was in Tucson, Arizona. as the chancellor of the Pima Community College District, I was already wrestling with our business model at the community colleges is broken. And I've been really learning about Clay Christensen and his work, and so understanding sustaining innovations, disruptive innovations, were things already weighing on my mind. So when our mentor said, we have about 35, 36 million adults with some college, no credential. What an indictment on higher education that is. By the way, that number is up to about 42, 43 million present day. It's growing. That's telling us our business model is seriously broken, right? But then I was also playing with other ideas. So how do we signal employers, colleges, learners, and bring us all together? And then Amazon came to part of that, right? Created this beautiful marketplace where people can easily go and rate and all of that. So it's a built-in accountability system as well. So that notion played in my head in terms of maybe a disruptive innovation business model way of thinking, right? And then I thought about Apple Music specifically, right? So what if we could disaggregate from the album the song? So the equivalent being the course and the competencies within a course. And then you can start to allow the learner to create their own playlist, right? But then what's that unit of measurement? It's Legos. Legos, think about that. The uniformity of those pieces you can snap together and create this beautiful image. So many things you can do with that. You break down the learning into those little units of measurement. And then I've been thinking about universal design. So what if we design our program of study, our courses, with this Lego concept in mind that could be put into an environment like a playlist and displayed into a marketplace where the learner now has agency, but then there's signal about what's needed in the marketplace by the employers, and the colleges become a part of the training ground to help facilitate this. So that was why I said yes. And to say yes meant I had to take a big risk. You can imagine, this is totally different thinking than community college thinking, right? Or higher ed thinking. And I would have to go to my board and explain why we would carve out X amount from our general fund to do this. And a couple of my board members were not happy about that. But you know what? I'll say it this way to you, but I would not have said it this way. 6 million adult problem in this country, and we've got to solve it. If we don't take responsibility for that, who's going to take responsibility for that? And so I'd rather lose my job and then be able to say, I did the right thing. And I wanted to partner with people who wanted to do the right thing as well. And that's where our mentor came in, and then we worked on some of the legal issues we had to work through. But we also had to bring other partners along. And so with that, I turn over to Amy. Amy Diaz, as you can see, is the president at Gateway in Phoenix, Arizona, sister city to Tucson, although they would say they're the flagship of the state. So Amy, what did you see that made it clear colleges could not solve this alone and required shared infrastructure to convert demand fast?
Thanks, Wesley, and hello, everyone. I think just generally speaking, I subscribe to the idea that community colleges are better versions of ourselves when we partner with industry and when we partner really with any of the appropriate partners that might exist in our communities. But specifically, it was May of 2020, and in Phoenix, Arizona, the Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company made an announcement that they were going to invest a lot of money in Phoenix, Arizona, and they were going to build a huge facility, which is still being built as we speak. They were requiring 3,000 technicians, semiconductor technicians, and in greater Phoenix area, Maricopa County at large, we probably have 4.5 million people who live there. So that math sounds okay, but really only probably 2 million or even a little bit less than 2 million are work age eligible. and many of them have interests in other areas. So for me, figuring out how Gateway, as one of 10 Maricopa community colleges in Maricopa County with 3 universities, ASU, of course, is bricks and mortar, but U of A and NAU both have some presence in Maricopa County, and a private university. So we have at least 14 different education partners for places like TSMC and Intel and other companies that are in the semiconductor training, have a semiconductor training need. They have at least 14 different front doors they have to figure out how to get through. They have at least 14 different people at these different institutions that they have to figure out. We have 14 different application processes, 14 different financial aid processes. The list just goes on and on and on. And we don't make it easy for industry partners when we have such a huge need for not training 30 or even 3,000 technicians. And their goal is within the next 2 years. I think that's where they'd like to see us. So that was the biggest signal to me, that even as 14 different educational institutions in the same county, we don't really even talk to each other that easily. So figuring out how to have a different infrastructure to create the more streamlined process for business and industry to work with us, especially in this very narrow focused area. I think we do better in healthcare, perhaps, than we do in advanced manufacturing and technician training. So that was really what got my attention, that we need to think differently, we need to be organized differently, and that we don't all need to employ a person to work with that industry. We can figure out how to organize ourselves differently.
Well, thank you, Amy, for that. So my other special friend is Tracy Martin. And Tracy was just becoming a newly minted president as we began to form Unmuddle. And so, Tracy, what changes when employer demand becomes visible and coordinated across institutions instead of remaining fragmented?
So I'd say similar to what you described earlier in the intro and what Amy shared. I don't think there's any question that institutions know we need to solve the problem. And we have brilliant faculty and instructors and others who come together to try to solve the problem. And many of them come from industry, but not all of them come from industry. And so when we look at the challenges that we were facing, we know that when employers can tell us and our industry sector partners can tell us to the best of their ability, because sometimes they're learning as well, but when they can tell us what they need, we rise to the occasion. And like Amy, I'd say early on in our process, we knew we had to reorganize ourselves. So we have a division of workforce and community success, trying to create one front door for C&M, and that includes our credit programs and our certificates, but also our upskilling, our professional upskilling, and our workforce training. And I would say that employers, when they can tell us what they need, our job then is to figure out what's the best way we can organize ourselves. So our people, our facilities, our financial aid, our career counseling, all of those elements, how do we bring those together to be as efficient for the employer, but really for the learners? So how do we meet these learners? And you mentioned, I think we're now at 43 million individuals who have some college, no degree. You know, in Albuquerque, we have 280,000 people. We are absolutely trying to meet with a high school degree, without a high school degree, with a high school, and with some college. And so we're really focused on people we don't reach. So how do we take what employers are telling us and how to best figure out how to use our incredible resources and support, how to help learners who really find our work pretty complicated and not as clear. And so the employers we found that when they can help us articulate what we need to provide, and we can provide all the supports we can help those learners enter the door, that's part of it. But those employers, when they tell us here's what we need and here's what we need to hire, that next step is really that post-completion outcomes, which we are all now really incredibly focused on. So I don't think there's any question, unlike my Aura ring, which helps me be data aware, I'm not really data informed, I'm certainly not data driven on any given day. It is very helpful to have employers help us shape and be responsive, and then frankly be partners in how we deliver what we need to do. So employers are critical in how we work and meet our community's needs.
Thank you, Tracy. And you've been at this business is organizational development, organizational effectiveness for quite a while, leading NISOT, supporting our colleges and universities across the country. So why do traditional approaches fail to convert demand into operating capacity?
Thank you, Lee. Good afternoon. Through the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development and the League for Innovation in the Community College, I spent much of my career working alongside America's community and technical colleges. As a result of these experiences, I knew one motto in the technician economy was a paradigm shifter right from the very start. As a result of my time at NISOT and the League, I've seen firsthand what their member institutions do exceptionally well. They serve the communities, they respond to local employers, and they change lives. That local responsiveness has always mattered because most Americans work for small and mid-sized businesses that power local economies every day. However, now the economy has become even more interconnected. Large employers often make major investments that anchor regions. They create long-term demand and build supply chains. And when they expand, hundreds of smaller businesses often appear and expand alongside them. Today, multiple layers of demand are moving at once. Local employers, regional employers, and national employers. And no single college, that's not a failure, that's a structural gap. Community and technical colleges are responding to the communities they serve. Employers are responding to the needs of their businesses. But no entity has been responsible for coordinating demand across the full market and translating it into capacity at scale. That was already a challenge. And now, as technician demand grows across advanced industries, that gap is becoming harder and more costly to ignore. That's the missing layer. I believe investing in coordination infrastructure may be one of the most important investments this country can make next. Investments not just in education, not just in industry, but investments in the infrastructure that helps both move together. Matthew, want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Amazon to address this issue?
Sure. So I think the really interesting thing about all of this is having been an academic and on the industry side, both sides of that equation can get a little obsessed and go too deep on the frameworking and the modeling and the research and the data and not push that conversation into the actual needs. So I think just like Tracy said about meeting learners where they are on their path to a degree or credential to prepare themselves for the workforce, we also have to have the same conversation of the industry of enough of a framework so that we're having the same conversation using common definitions, but not over-engineering that framework to the point that we're not actually having a conversation about here's the bottom line, here's what we actually need, here's what we're seeing in our production facilities or in our, in Amazon's case, a fulfillment center or customer fulfillment network, having that conversation about what we're actually seeing of today's employees are deficient in these particular areas that we would really like to upskill them in. How can we provide people with that equipment, like equip them with those skills, not only for our current workforce, but for students who are working their way toward graduation, and making sure that that connection stays very timely in that feedback loop. Because it's not a conversation, as we often do, of starting to project out into the future of, I want to redesign the, robotics technician curriculum for this associate degree that we're going to spend 2 years talking about, a year and a half in state review for approval for the program, launch it, wait 2 years, and then it's 7 years down the line on a conversation that's already 6 months behind in terms of the data that's available. So the part that's really, really interesting and impactful, I think, about the technician economy is that it facilitates those conversations live to say, here's what people need today to survive the next 6 months. Here is what then follows from that on how we improve the pipeline for the future. keeping that continuous feedback loop going.
Thank you. Why don't we just give a quick hand to Amy Tracy and Austin. These are the people that have been putting their money where their mouth is, putting the money behind the technician economy in order to start addressing the structural issues that are connected here. It's a real pleasure to be able to announce here with everybody present that Matt Austin from the industry side, along with Tracy Hartzler from the college side, will be co-chairing the Technician Economy Futures Council. So please, and that's a 2-year